Good evening. I thought I did that. Okay. Good evening and welcome to the South Burlington City Development Review Board of October 18th, 2022. Pardon me. My name is Dawn Philibert. I'm chair of the board, and with me tonight are fellow board members Dan Albrecht, Stephanie Wyman, Quinn Mann, John Stern, and we will be joined possibly later by Mark Baer, and also from the City of South Burlington, Marla Keene, our Development Review Planner and Zoning Administrator, and our Director of Planning, Paul Connor. Thank you all for coming. There's a couple of ways to participate in this meeting. One is to attend, as many of you are doing tonight. The other way is to attend virtually, and you can also call in and participate that way. If you are here in person, we ask that you sign up back in the sign-in sheet and with your contact information. And if you're participating remotely, please give us your contact number in the chat function so that you can, be registered as a participant should you ever wish to attain party status in any further action. And if you're on the phone, you can register and provide your contact information by emailing Marla at mkeene@southburlingtonvt.gov. We ask that you keep your microphones muted and your cameras off unless you're actively participating in the item before the board. And during the public comment section, if you wish to comment, turn your camera on, raise your hand, or indicate you'd like to provide testimony in the chat room, and we will acknowledge you. And then when you are acknowledged, you can turn your camera and your audio on. And we ask that you keep the chat function to just administrative use only by registering your contact information. It's not part of the public record if you have cross conversations about that. Okay, first item on the agenda is the emergency evacuation procedures. There are doors in the back on each side of the room, the auditorium. In case of an emergency, you would simply exit through those doors and turn right or left, and you'll be outside. Quickest way is to go that way. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes in the order of agenda items? Hearing none. Couple of announcements. This meeting is being recorded. Any other announcements? Are there any comments and questions from the public not related to the agenda? Hearing none, we will move on to agenda item number 5. Pardon me. This is continued site plan application SP 22045 of SRTB Holdings LLC to amend a previously approved plan for an auto sales and service facility. The amendment consists of 3,980 square feet of a building addition on 2 facades and associated site improvements at 1650 Shelburne Road. Before we introduce the applicants, does anyone have a disclosure or a conflict of interest to announce?
I'll just say that I live adjacent to this property, but I don't think that'll affect my ability to be impartial.
Thank you. Who is here for the applicant, please?
Brian Moore
Brian.
and Kevin Worden with Engineering Ventures.
Hi, Kevin. Any other people?
Jay Langford from Gosnell.
Jay. Thank you. And anyone else? Have you all been sworn in at a previous meeting?
Yes, I think Matt is doing them also remote.
Matt, are you there?
Can't hear you.
There's no Matt online yet. Oh,
Matt
there's a Brent.
is online, but he's muted.
Oh yeah, there's a Matt Tyler. Excuse me.
Matt.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks. We can't hear you.
Okay.
Wait, I got 2 hands. Two people raised their
Brent
hands.
Gossett from BBL, the other one.
Okay.
Yeah, Brent with DBL.
Have you been sworn in at a previous hearing?
Yes.
And Matt?
He was sworn in last time. I think we're not hearing you, Matt.
We can't hear you, Matt.
Hopefully he's working on it.
Okay. Okay. What we have tonight is a draft finding of facts and decisions, conclusions and decisions for us to review. Before we start, is there anything that you would like to say? Or are you good with walking through the decision?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Let's do that.
So Dawn, if you recall, this was one that Marty was taking the lead on. Marty is at a training this week, so
Okay.
I'm going to do my best to fill his shoes.
Perfect. All right. The first comment. I don't know why my comments don't. This is about landscape budget minimums. Staff considers that every effort should be made by the applicant to come into compliance with this criterion, and that the addition of 3 more shade trees would sufficiently increase the subject property's level of compliance with the above criterion. What are your comments, thoughts about that?
Do you want me to take it back? Okay. I think based on the last hearing, we came away with the understanding that the stone wall, which is a landscape item for the second vehicle display, was an acceptable landscaping feature to apply to the landscaping budget. But maybe we misunderstood.
So that's really in staff comment number 2, and it's unfortunate that this is just sort of the way the order of the decision works out. That, but if we want to sort of discuss these two things together, staff comment number 2 is about the landscape budget and gets to what Kevin's talking about.
Yes. I think that makes sense. So, as Marla said, staff comment number 2 is about the landscaping budget. And let me just review this. Marla, this isn't, well, Marty isn't here. So your concern is that the pedestal for the cart should not be part of the landscaping budget?
That's correct.
And you were under the impression that it is.
Well, so at the last hearing, I think Mark, and it's unfortunate that he isn't able to join us right away, Mark suggested, well, you could even do another one of those stone things for vehicle display. And, you know, it was just sort of an off-the-cuff comment.
Yeah.
I think the applicant really ran with that. Reviewing the regulations, you know, this is the landscaping, let me back up. The board is allowed to allow credit towards things other than plants, other than trees and shrubs, when the landscaping standards are otherwise met. You know, so they typically include things like hardscape, decorative features, sculptures, that kind of thing. This feature is really more like an outdoor storage, outdoor vehicle, or outdoor display of merchandise. I'm sorry, it's not outdoor storage. It's under the same LDR, though. Outdoor display of merchandise. And it's also, if you don't think of it that way, which, by the way, that's a conditional use. If you don't think of it that way, it's sort of parking in the front if you think about it the other way of looking at it. Mm-hmm. So neither of those things are really things that, well, first of all, parking in the front is prohibited. Outdoor display of merchandise is allowed as a conditional use, but we haven't warned it as a conditional use. So it's not really something we want to just take lightly. Mm-hmm. And the third point was that this vehicle display area is 25% of their proposed required landscape budget, which seems like an awful lot for something that isn't really consistent with the objectives of the LDR. So that's where we thought, you know, if they wanted to plant around it, that might be great. Plant around it and the other one, that might be great. Increase the trees on the north side of the property to better comply with that front yard landscaping. Those were 3 ideas that we had.
Okay. And would 3 or more shade trees do it?
Well, it depends on the cost of the trees, but I think that it would be 6 of the trees at the price that they had been quoting them. Is that right, Kevin?
Yeah, the 7,500 for
6
the natural stone vehicle display would require just a little bit more than 3 trees for the of the Green Gable variety.
Would it be just 3 then?
Just a little bit more than those. We'd have to do another half a tree.
Okay. Yeah, we thought we had done the math wrong, like after we had already published the packet.
I think so. So what we'd probably do, I mean, I guess I'd be interested in a little more discussion around the display, since that was something we left with that impression. I don't know if stone walls in general are allowed. I understand some of the finer points that Marla made with regard to parking and outdoor display, but I'd be certainly interested to hear that. If stone walls have been used in the past to meet the landscaping budget, we'd be curious about that precedent, but it would be a little more than 3 trees. I think the equivalent would be 3 trees and then a few additional flowered areas, landscaped areas.
And I certainly don't want to put words in the mouths of you all up there, but what I thought I heard, again, we're very fortunate in the instance that our property is very well landscaped as it is, and there's a lot of trees all the way around it. I think, we were discussing, there's certainly an opportunity to put a couple of trees in the back, and we were talking and agreed to put a couple of trees on the north side by Green Mountain Drive as well, which has been added to the plan. But certainly there is a precedence when we talk about vehicles in certain instances like this, and a very artistically done, well hardscape for them to park on for the Jeep brand out front. And other dealerships I know do have specific parking out front, including but not limited to the other store that I own across the street. So I'm just hoping if it's a matter of adding some perennials and whatever around it, that we can find a way without having to add a whole lot more trees, because trees do damage to paint, and that's one of the things we're kind of avoiding in the back inventory area where our storage parking is. As much
to
as
the painted
possible.
cars, I see.
They do, yeah. Yeah, so I mean, we know that we're going to have landscape, but it happens to be where we park a lot of our inventory doesn't have a lot of trees, and we're hoping to avoid adding to that.
So let me just be clear. I know you have one kind of rock display for a vehicle. Do you have one, and are you proposing another one?
Correct.
I
Correct.
see.
And I thought I understood that as a suggestion from the board,
I
as
see.
a way of saying, hey, look, this is a property that has a lot of landscaping already. Maybe there's a way we can work into this budget, a way to get your budget to meet the dollar figure of the budget, but also allow the applicant, myself, a little leeway here in a creative way. Is what I thought I understood. But the existing is in the northwest corner,
Okay.
closest to Green Mountain Drive, and we were talking about.
And would you have a vehicle on each one?
Yes.
I see.
Yep.
So one of my concerns here is that outdoor display of merchandise is a conditional use, and we didn't warn it as a conditional use hearing. I don't think that the board couldn't entertain a proposal like that, but I don't know that we can approve it as part of this application. And I'm just double checking that because sometimes they get mixed up.
Other thoughts from the board?
What are your plans with the existing trees that line Shelburne? Are you going to leave them or take them away? Or?
I think they're maintained. Yeah, I have to look through the plans. Did we need to remove one? I have to go through back to the existing conditions plan. But no, those are the goal is to maintain those. They're all staying.
Yeah, they're all staying.
Yeah.
I mean, I could envision, and I understand the display of merchandise is tricky, especially if it needs to be a conditional use, but I could envision plantings and bushes at the base of each of those rock structures.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in one respect, that would bring the eye to those cars, which might not be what we want to do, but certainly understand the problem with trees falling on cars. We don't want to be ruining paint. What are some other thoughts about the landscaping?
Can they build the wall without displaying merchandise and then go through the conditional use?
Yeah, I can feel that becoming an enforcement nightmare.
I guess I would question. I mean, isn't parking a car for sale at a approved car dealership outdoors an accessory or allowed use? I can certainly understand that. You know, merchandise display in another situation would be a you know, conditional approval if that was an accessory to the approved use. But
Yeah, it gets approved for certain areas when the site plan is approved for a car dealer. So this would be adding a new area.
got it.
And actually, this property did have approval for 3, but that approval lapsed. They only installed 1, and then the approval for the other 2 expired.
It expired because
Because they weren't installed.
Enough
What-
time went by and they
what
weren't
had to
installed.
be what?
Permits expire if you don't actually construct the project. I suppose we could do something if you were really interested in pursuing this, if this made sense. You know, it's going to take you a while to construct this addition. You could get approval as a site plan, you know, and say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do the trees. And then amend it while you're still under construction. I don't know how much of a hurry you're in.
For conditional use.
Yeah.
Amend it.
Okay.
That's fair.
I mean, it's a little more work. You gotta keep Kevin on salary a little longer.
Yeah, I like Kevin.
So does that work for you?
Yeah.
So can you enumerate what your specific sort of land, so I guess, is the board okay with that? And they're okay with this vehicle display area representing 25% of the required landscape budget? Or did you want to see some plantings around it?
I think it would be really nice to have some plantings around it. It doesn't have to be elaborate, but you know, I think it would be very nice. It would make it less hard. But that's just my opinion. Other people?
Would the brand allow you to do that? I know that sometimes your hands are tied in certain ways.
I can't imagine as long as it didn't totally obscure the rocks. As long as you could see the stones and the rocks, I can't imagine that would be a problem if some sort of landscaping were really soft around the bottom of it.
Yeah.
I would think that would be fine.
So I can imagine an approval where I say, the board finds that the applicant may amend their plan to, you know, provide this feature in such and such a way. However, as approved, the applicant shall provide, and then I want you to tell me what you told me again, 3 trees of what species and
Yeah,
some
three
additional.
three Green Gables and additional little quick fire to meet the budget.
And that would be in the front yard along Green Mountain Drive.
I think what we would look at is 1 tree on Green Mountain Drive and 2 trees on the rear slope by the stairs.
And Green Gables is a type of tree?
That's right. That's what those
Deciduous.
2 trees there are.
Okay. Okay.
How does that feel?
I'm good with that. Board?
Looking at the street view, the Green Mountain Drive is somewhat bereft of trees. I don't know if it's feasible to do 2 and then 2 along there and one somewhere else, but at least looking at the street view. And I get it, people want, you
Well,
want
they're
to,
proposing 2 already, so they're
oh,
gonna add a third.
add a third there. Okay, gotcha. All right.
So just to be clear, the 2 on the plan are in regardless of
Okay.
the discussion
Oh,
tonight.
okay, good.
Right.
Okay, gotcha.
And we would add a third,
That's these 2, right, Kevin?
yeah, and then 2 out back
Yeah, that rectifies
near
it
that
then, yeah.
stair.
Okay.
And then you would do an amendment to request permission to not plant those that you just described, and instead do the stone area that was, I think, on the bottom of the page, or
Correct, to the
Just
south.
to the
Yeah,
bottom of the.
plantings around it.
Right.
that's right.
Okay.
So we end up with, in the end, if they come back with an amendment, we end up with no trees at all,
You end up with the trees that are shown on the plan as
The
they have
2
proposed
there.
it today. Yes.
Right.
but not the third. Okay, all right, that's fine. As long as we keep the 2 trees, then looks okay to me.
Okay. Are we ready to turn to public comment? Sure. Let's ask if any members of the public have any comments to make. Anyone in the audience? Anyone online? Anyone online? Nobody? Okay.
Sorry, I didn't realize that was a nod to me.
Oh,
Nobody's
sorry.
requested to speak.
All right. I guess then we will entertain a vote to close the hearing.
Make a motion to close the hearing for site plan application SB-22-045 of SRTB Holdings LLC, 1650 Shelburne Road.
Do we have a second?
Seconded.
Okay, thank you. All in favor, is there any discussion? All in favor of adopting the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, it's carried.
Thank you.
So we will be deliberating on this at an upcoming meeting. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay. Good evening. Agenda item number 6 is the site plan application SB 22047 of the University of Vermont to amend the plan for an existing agricultural complex. The amendment consists of adding outdoor storage as a use at 650 Spear Street.
My son goes to UVM,
Okay.
but I don't think,
Okay, yeah. There's a few other students there.
yeah.
And Don, I worked on the design for the solar facility at this location, but I don't think that will affect my ability
Okay.
to be impartial.
Thank you. Any other disclosures or conflicts? Okay. Who is here for the applicant, please?
My name is Lonnie Raven. I'm an associate planner with the University of Vermont. And here today with me is Derek Reed, stormwater consulting engineer for the university.
Derek, is it?
Derek Reed of
And
Krebs in Lansing.
Someone else is with you too?
Yes, we have Luce Hillman, the executive director of facilities management. And Dave Blatchley might be online. I don't see his name up there, but
No, it's just who you see.
not there. Okay.
And
So it's-
and the woman in back of you? I'm sorry.
Luce
Okay.
Hillman, executive director of facilities management.
Okay. Thank you. I thought you said Bruce, so I was a little.
Nope.
Okay. Before we get started, do you have any comments you'd like to begin with? Very briefly?
Well, I could introduce the project or address the comments of staff. I would like to address the comments of staff at some point.
And we will have you do that. We'll walk through the staff report. But I'm wondering if you have any introductory comments.
Sure.
Why is this an issue? Why? What happened?
Okay, yes, then I can explain that. In 2019, the university got permitted to build the Tarrant Multipurpose Event Center farther up on Spear Street. And then March 2020 happened, and as we know, that was a little bit of a disruption. That disruption included a mandatory work stoppage for a number of months, major unforeseen expenses, interruptions in construction supply chains. So the university needed to step back from active construction. However, we had already received a shipment of large pieces of steel. So we talked with the city at the time. We needed a place to store it quickly. And a place that was appropriate was here near the compost pads for many reasons. It's close to the main project. It's an appropriate area. It's not going to disturb anyone. It's not visible. There were a whole bunch of reasons why that was a good place for us to do it. However, So we got permission to put it there temporarily, and today, as time went on, we realized that the delay in construction will continue. So at this point, we do not have a timeline for completion of the future phases. We have done one phase of construction, but the phase that we will need the steel members for, we don't know when that's going to happen yet. So for that reason, the university is applying for a site plan amendment in order to continue to store the steel at 650 Spear Street. The steel itself is piled very carefully, by the way, up to 8 feet high, and it's mapped so that we can remove it. We know what we're removing when it comes time to remove it, because it's big, it's heavy, it's complicated to remove. The site is accessible by way of an existing unpaved farm road off of Spear Street. And there's no added traffic as a result of the storage. When the university is ready to remove the steel, there'll be a one-time removal of the steel with trucks from the access road on Spear Street, and it's going to go up to the project site.
Where is the project site again, please?
147 Spear Street, it's the athletic campus.
Okay.
So there's one small area that's sort of nestled between the Gutterson Field House and Patrick Gym, and that's going to be infilled with this multipurpose event center.
I see. Okay.
And that was a whole permitting thing. We got all the permits for that, and then pandemic.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful. Another.
I'm sorry. Maybe it's none of our business, but why is the project still on hold?
I explained that before. Because of the pandemic, the prices went way up, and the university was no longer able to complete the project, and other reasons, supply chain, whatever. So the cost of the project went up too much. So we had to stop construction.
And it now, because inflation's going to be here for a little while, I would assume, you're saying that that steel might be stored there for an indeterminate amount of time.
Right now, it's an indeterminate amount of time. I don't know, and there's no specific plans. However, we did do one phase of construction, a lot of internal improvements, and one small portion of the multipurpose event center. But the multipurpose event center itself, that's what the steel is for, and that's what we don't have a timeline for.
Thank you.
Good questions. One other very naive question. I noticed from the photographs that the steel is very rusty. Is that what steel does? And will it still be fully usable when you go to build?
So I'm not the technical person here, but I believe it will still be completely useful.
Okay. Steel is steel.
Anybody want to?
No, it will be very useful. Okay, thank you.
One other thing that sort of we kept in mind when reviewing this project is the steel itself has value. So even if this multi-use center the university were to decide they weren't going to pursue it and they were, tore everything out and put it back to a parking lot, they would still have an incentive to move this steel along because it's capital that's tied up.
Sure.
Absolutely. Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So, any other questions from the board before we start moving through the comments? Question number 1 is about the wetland buffer protection. And the question is it likely that the buffer impacts are I can't read my own writing, proposed? Or do we need a new delineation and an expedited delineation? I might as well have read the comments, but sorry.
Yes. So we have plans from 2005 that show that as a Class 3 wetland, and it's an appropriate distance away from the steel storage. So the question here is there a likelihood that the wetland will shift, and do we need an updated wetland delineation? Right.
So our opinion is that we recognize that wetlands move and they have to be redelineated every 5 years. This location is steep slopes, so the water isn't really migrating up the hill. And so ability for the wetland to migrate based on wetness is just, it's not really present. So we don't expect that the wetland has moved with the steep slopes that they are. It won't move 3 feet, 4 feet. Basically, we're 56, it's 120 feet roughly from the outside of our disturbance to the edge of the 2005 map or 2002 map of wetlands. Our opinion is they're not going to adjust that much more that it would impact the project. So we're asking.
You believe you don't need a new delineation?
That's our opinion. That's our request, is that be viewed as an acceptable wetland delineation, even though it's old. Even if it was a class 3, moved to a class 2 because the wetland rules changed, it still is well beyond the 100-foot
Okay.
buffer.
Thoughts from the board about that?
If the storage time is indeterminate, is there any risk of leaching into the soil and expansion of some leaching material to the wetland?
It's on fabric. So
Yeah, it's on fabric. I just can't
Is it
envision. What's that?
covered?
It's not covered now. No. So, I mean, there's small amounts, I'm sure, but again, the point in time where I think that would be an issue, this value of the steel, I think would have to.
Well, and we're talking about steel, and steel is made of iron and carbon,
Right.
and soil is also made of iron and carbon.
Might increase the levels a little bit, but I don't think it's I don't know.
There's nothing toxic there.
No, I don't think there's anything toxic there. I just think it's right. It might migrate into the soil a little bit, but I just don't see it anything that's a concern.
But the distance appears to be sufficient in terms of, in other words, if it was a steel building, would we regulate it the same way? If the setbacks, the distance is enough, then.
And what might not be as apparent on this plan is there's a berm around this,
I read that.
and we're
yes.
within the berm, which contains the runoff, I guess.
And I just have a question because these are newer regulations for us. So I assume we are considering this because the regulations do not outline how current a wetland delineation has to be valid. Is that correct?
No, the city relies on the state wetland rules, which consider a wetland delineation current for 5 years.
Okay.
But it's proving a negative in this case.
Yep.
So that's why there's some interpretation necessary.
Gotcha. So yeah, just for consistency, I wanted to understand that, and I agree. Given this particular situation with the topography and what information's from the previous wetland delineation, I don't see a reason to have that.
Is there anyone on the board who believes that we should require a new delineation? No. You do? No. Oh.
No.
You were nodding yes.
No. Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
Okay, good. All right. All right, let's move on. Staff comment number 2 is really about prohibiting any expansion of the stored items or adding anything to it.
So we are fine with that condition of not adding to it. We don't think there's room. We have no intention of adding to it. And the situation is that we're not in the business of just storing stuff. This is for a specific purpose. So that condition is fine.
Okay, great. And that is it for staff comments. Are there any other questions from the board before we move on to public comment? Hearing none. Let's move on to public comment. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment on this project? Any, Paul, that you see online? Okay, good. Then I guess there are none. And I guess the question is, we take a vote on closing this hearing? Okay. I move that we close site plan application SB 22047. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motion is carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Hello. Hi.
Agenda number 7. Certified Site Plan Application SB 22028 of Rieley Cohen Partnership LLC to amend a previously approved site plan for a 13,000 square foot contractor or building trade facility with outdoor storage. The amendment consists of constructing a 5,500 square foot addition and additional outdoor storage at 4 Harbor View Road. Any disclosures or conflicts of interest to declare? Hearing none. Who is here for the applicant?
Oh, I am Matthew Cohen.
Yep, and I'm Dan Heil with Trudell Consulting Engineers.
Okay.
And I'm Lucy Thayer with Trudell Consulting Engineers.
Hi, Lucy. That's it for the team? Did
That
we
is it.
swear you all in last time?
No, this is continued without being heard. So this is your first time talking with them about this project.
Oh, okay. I thought we heard from them before. All right. So would you all raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
I do.
Good. Thank you. Okay. Could you, let me make sure I'm at the beginning of your, we have about 12 comments on this. Do you want to start with a very brief overview of what you're wanting to do?
Sure.
Or do you want to just launch into the comments?
We can give an overview to begin with.
Okay.
Yep. So the project is located on a 1.8 acre parcel. It's approximately a tenth of a mile to the east of the Harborview Road, Shelburne Road intersection. Site's occupied by Pinnacle Properties, a landscaping and property management business. Pinnacle will be the sole occupant of both the existing building and the proposed expansion upon construction. Property is currently approved for a 13,000 square foot existing building and 1,694 foot accessory structure, as well as outdoor storage of contractor supplies. Site is accessed via a shared drive off of Harborview Road. The proposal will maintain the existing access off Harborview Road, and 5,280 square foot building expansion is proposed to the northeast corner of the existing building. The building expansion will consist of 4 bays with 4 overhead doors, and the expansion has been designed to match the existing building architecture. Site improvements also include additional outdoor storage and parking, as well as stormwater management improvements for the increase in impervious area, as well as the redevelopment area. There is an existing privacy fence surrounding the existing parking lot, which is to be expanded upon and follow the new limits of the proposed outdoor storage and parking area. That's pretty much it.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Let's go ahead and just jump into the staff comments.
Sure.
Number 1, the question is, there seems to be workspace areas with independent entrances, restroom facilities, and fire-rated partitions. What is the proposed function and use of that space?
So, as our business has grown, we have we require us to have separate spaces. One being a mechanical space for repairing vehicles, the other for being a fabrication space for doing welding or fabrication, and then we also do wood shop or woodworking. So one would be a wood shop as well.
Okay.
The individual spaces would have doors going through to each space along with bathrooms, so the staff is not running all the way to the office and going back. So each space would have a bathroom, or it'd be fitted up to have a bathroom.
Okay. But there's no intent to, or no plan to sublease
No,
this space. Okay.
no, not at all.
All right. Questions?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I would have to think about the implications and whether this would be necessary, but would it be a burden to you if we included a condition pending review and if it actually made a difference that said if it were to convert to a multi-tenant space, additional site plan review would be required even if it was still contractor and building trade facility?
Yeah, I would assume that and expect that if at some point the property was to be subdivided, that we would come to the board again and ask for, approval to do so. But that is
So
not
we'll
my,
just include that as a condition.
that's not
and
my
that should be
intent
fine.
at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not an issue at all for me.
Okay. Thank you. Number 2 is really a request to improve the appearance of the building. Is it fair to say it was a little too industrial and uninteresting?
That's
Is that fair, Mo? Pardon?
What are the standards in the
Right.
district?
I mean,
That's
the standards in the standards are what we rely on here. We're not making judgment calls as to beauty of people's buildings, but it should be consistent and mitigate abrupt transitions, be pedestrian oriented. These are the standards of 1406.
And the building was oriented to extend north to south. That's how we have it on the plan right now as the existing building. That's the way it's oriented. So we were trying to provide consistency between the existing building as well as the proposed expansion. The design of the building was designed to match the existing building with the flat roof. The existing height would be the same, the colors and the materials would be the same as well. There will be a proposed fence around the perimeter of the parking lot, outdoor storage, which will provide some screening. However, there's a 48-foot section of the proposed expansion, that northernmost section that has frontage along Harborview Road, that would not have fencing around it, but we have proposed dense vegetation in that area to help screen it from Harborview Road. And Lucy is on the call as well, and she can go into a little more detail on that plan, either now or I know there was a comment further down about that landscaping.
So the LDR is really about, the neighborhood and the setting more than just the existing building. And I just wanted to remind the board, if you drive down that road, it's a transition. Right? It transitions from the C2 where this project is to the R12, some residential district.
Allen Road to C2.
So that,
And R4 up at the top.
right. So it kind of transitions from this kind of more multi-purpose use to group housing for seniors, and then to single-family homes and duplexes as you go farther up. So we're really looking for buildings that work well in that transitional setting.
The building to the east of the site is also similar material, metal shell building. So it is consistent with other buildings in the area. And, as I mentioned, the majority of the building will be screened from Harborview Road with that fence, or at least partially screened from Harborview Road due to the 6-foot high fence. It's really just that 48-foot section that would be visible from Harborview Road, and that section, we've tried to screen it the best we can. But
Do you have any photos of the building as it currently exists?
That's that area there.
I don't believe we submitted photos
Okay.
of the building. I do have photos, but
Do you want Paul to pull up just the Google Street View?
Yeah, is it the one
Sure.
right next to O'Reilly?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, Paul's gonna pull up the Street View.
Okay, thanks.
No, it's mislabeled.
I'm kind of curious how to look afterwards, how many trees are getting lost. Well, you're doing the bioretention areas in the front on the north side,
Mhm.
but then which will reduce some trees, and then you're adding trees to replace it. So
correct. And there's also a evergreen hedge running along the perimeter of that fence as
Yeah.
well too, which would provide some additional screen.
and that's the fence with the fabric screening in it, or the
Yep.
the
So
that, I'm sorry, that's the building going to the east of our facility.
yep, that's
So that's old Shelburne Plastics, actually. So if we were to,
So you're farther to the right?
I'm farther,
Yeah.
closer to Shelburne Road.
Oh,
So we would be the next building.
the one that's yellow on the screen right now?
I can't see the.
I don't know that I.
This one
the
here.
KSI commercial kitchen.
So if you were to other way,
Yep, and then
yep, that would be correct.
You can barely see the building because of the screening.
Right, so
I
all
think if
those
you go
trees
up,
in the
you can
front are proposed to be removed.
Oh.
And the building will move a lot closer to the street. And that
Oh.
may be what Lucy wants to
Okay,
talk about.
I
So,
see.
so that fencing that we see there, that will be gone.
that will be relocated, and we are proposing. I believe the plan said a screen mesh around it, but I
It would be
think
a
we'd be going with privacy slats.
privacy slats instead of the cloth fencing. Privacy slats, and then a row of arborvitaes, I think 6 to 8 feet tall in front of the fence,
Okay.
and then a large variety of shrubs and plants, perennials, and then also a large amount of trees as well. And the trees that are now existing there are actually all mostly pine trees that are old and that are not doing well. They're unhealthy. A lot of them have actually fallen in the past year.
And from that street view too that we were just looking at, there will be a boulder retaining wall in between the privacy fence and Harbor View Road, right next to the bioretention too. That would be approximately 2 feet high.
What do you think, Board?
Well, back to the issue. This is more about the buildings that Marla's bringing up, and I guess the question is, what's this text? Is it new text from prior years, or is it new text compared to previous years in terms of what the Planning Commission was trying to achieve?
It is, yes.
But from my point of view, if there's that much screening and it is an area that's kind of industrial, you don't really even see the building. So it seems kind of burdensome for the applicant to have to change some of their architecture or detailing if it's really not going to be visible. That's just my opinion.
You know, unfortunately, the standard probably doesn't say that. That if a building is not visible, you don't have to abide by the regs.
So we need some help, guys.
It's all such a mixed orientation. That's what's the issue, though. So it's not like they're all lined up neatly with similar setbacks in a row, and we're trying to make them match up. It is a hodgepodge, and it's along that area. So
What are the proposed, can we put the proposed building back up? Thank you.
So that little section is the section that's proposed to face the street
Facing west,
north.
north.
Correct.
North.
It'll be, I think, 48 feet in
And
width.
it's just the proposed part, so it would be that left part. That
And the right part
existing-
is stepped back pretty
yes,
far,
correct. Yeah, the right part is stepped back, and that would be behind the privacy fence.
So two proposed additions. We have two buildings, two proposed additions.
Oh, one existing building, one proposed addition. So what you're looking at right there, the north elevation, on the left-hand side, that 48 feet is the proposed addition. And then on the right-hand side, it's the existing building, and that's stepped back actually 110 feet from the northern edge of the proposed addition.
The note here says windows and things. Are those particularly hard to put into this kind of construction? Or is it a
They're
security issue?
panels, so they're raised panels with a steel structure. So they're, they're not easy. And the facility doesn't have any windows existing already, except the front door, which has glass and then on both sides. So there are no windows in the existing building as it is.
Is there anything decorative, simple and decorative you could add to make it more interesting?
I mean,
Sure.
so seriously, in other projects of us, we're not trying to say that your form shouldn't follow your function, but other projects have been slightly bigger and had more opportunity, but have done something like, the top of the panel is blue and the bottom of the panel is gray, and maybe there's like a transom window up at the top.
I mean, I'm not opposed to, on the north side of the 48-foot section, using some sort of metal corrugated siding with putting some windows in for the wood shop, 2 maybe 4x4 windows with some sort of coordinated steel, and just on that particular side. It would make, it would probably look better than just a raised panel of the existing material. I don't necessarily know if you would be able to see that after all the shrubs in front of it as well, as the shrubs grow tall. That's,
Yeah, Lucy, what would the mature height of those shrubs be?
So there's a variety of trees placed in front and shrubs, but we did plant along the frontage street tree type trees. So those would be the same height as your typical street tree, which will, be the same height as, the building or taller. So, 45 feet at maturity. And then we also have, the topography varies a little bit, but we also have, I think we're kind of getting a little bit ahead of when I was going to talk about this, but there's a lot of layering in the landscape plan. So there are shrubs at the base level, then there are a small tree, so that carpinus, the ironwood, that will have a canopy that's lower than the street trees will eventually have. So we really tried to take an approach with the landscape plan that we would hit all of those areas to provide screening on multiple levels against that northern facade.
What does the board think?
Okay. Thank you for entertaining these questions. From a quality of work life, do you think that some amenities that increase the attractiveness of the facilities might help with employee retention or anything along those lines? Or maybe you don't have a problem with employee retention. I don't know.
No, I wish, we're very blessed that putting windows in, I don't know if the guys are going to quit or stay for a couple of windows.
It's nice to get some natural light in there. I mean, I appreciate.
There are skylights actually in the main facility.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the willingness to do a little bit of that on the north side. It's getting, making it a little more interesting down the road. And
So,
What if we table this, because we're going to talk about the landscaping a bit more, and I think that one of the interesting things here is this site is burdened with a historically very high value landscaping plan. And so, you know, we usually try to think about what a property will look like when Pinnacle has gotten so big that they want to move to, you know, a bigger facility you know, Commerce Way or something. I don't know. That's in Williston. I don't know. I couldn't think of a good example. I got nervous. But you know, we think about what might happen over the lifespan of this building rather than the lifespan of their use of the building. And with the landscaping, that's going to play a really big role in this. So let's put a pin in this and go back.
Okay, let's move on to number 3. And this is a request to revise the parking plan because the parking spaces as proposed are blocking the use of at least one overhead door.
Yep. So right now there is 5 existing parking spaces directly to the west of the existing building. And then back on that Google image, you could see actually 9 more parking spaces further to the west across from the existing building on the west side of the existing parking lot. We were proposing an additional 5 parking spaces on the northern, that's the Google image right there. So you can see 9 additional parking spaces on the west side there, closest to the entrance. Our proposal had 5 parking spaces next to the northernmost portion of the building expansion. Those parking spaces were in front of an overhead door. Talking with Matt, those cars really are just going to be there overnight, and then the employee comes in, gets them, goes off to a job site, it's gone all day. So it wouldn't prohibit the use of that overhead door when it's needed. But I think we're looking for feedback from staff and the board too on the parking width requirement, how the parking width is limited to the width of the building. And I don't know if you have that PDF I sent you today, Marla, if you could pull that up. Because there's a couple different ways I was looking at measuring the width of the building.
Yeah, while Paul's pulling that up, it's actually more straightforward than it used to be in the more recent LDR. It's
Okay.
the width of the building that is to the side of or in front of the parking is the width you get. If there's parking between the building and the street, then that doesn't count as the width of the building. It'd be in this case just your 48 feet because
So it'd be the 48 feet. Okay. Yeah, I was looking at.
in this case, now with this revised plan, you don't have parking.
So this is what I looked at trying to move that parking away from the overhead doors, because if we're only allowed parking within that 48 feet with the overhead doors, there's not really enough room. I looked at adding parking in between the overhead doors. There, I think it was 6 or 7 feet.
Yeah, but you've changed the measurement in this plan, right? Because now there's no parking that is proposed between the other existing parking, the existing building and the street.
I was looking at the width of the existing building, that 108 feet.
As long as it's not separated from the street by parking, you can count it.
Okay.
Separated from the street.
Does that make sense?
Separated from the street by parking?
Yeah, I can draw on it. Hang on.
I think this plan also does help address a couple other comments further on in the staff report. I was looking at that 108 feet of the existing building, and if you scroll down a little bit on this PDF, I believe it's the existing parking to the south would be 101 feet wide, including the travel way. The proposed parking to the north would be 86 feet wide as an extension from that northwest existing building corner. So if you're looking at that 108 feet for the building width, I think this plan would work well. It would remove the parking away from the proposed building addition and overhead doors. I also pulled the parking a little bit to the south to provide some additional snow storage area behind the parking, which would be outside storage during summer months. And the outside storage area line work has been tweaked a little bit to allow for vehicular circulation on site too. So I was looking for feedback on that width requirement. Could we use that 108 feet from the existing building rather than that 48 feet? Because we're really limited if we use that 48 feet on where we could propose parking with overhead doors on that side.
Paul, can you just either zoom out or pan so we can see the street? So the way the rule works is if you project everything out to the street, the building and the parking, in your previous plan, your parking was actually from here to here. So it was blocking this portion of the building, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now you've gotten rid of that parking, and your parking width is here to here, and your building width is actually, I'm going to switch colors, now here to here. So in this scenario, you were meeting it, but when you had your parking in this area, you weren't meeting it.
Mm-hmm. And that was blocking the overhead door.
Or
I
maybe
mean, we
you
were
were
still
just
within the
meeting it,
width,
yeah.
right? But we were just blocking the overhead
Right,
door.
so if you kept this parking and this parking, that wouldn't work. But since you've removed the previous one, I think you're meeting the LDRs for parking width. Not speaking to any of the other staff comments, but just the parking width comment at this time.
So we're good on the parking width issue.
I just have a question. The way that the parking is being shown now, I mean, can they really maneuver to those spaces further to the west if there's snow storage in front of it with the fence behind it?
Maneuver to the spaces to the west.
I think that fence is going to be removed, right?
That fence is going to be removed along the thicker
Completely
dash
removed
line.
and not-
Completely removed, and it's going to follow the new perimeter of the parking and storage area. So that fence will be gone. That fence isn't going to go through the middle of the parking lot. Same with that light.
Okay.
That light would be relocated as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
So are we ready to move on? Do we have what we need? Okay, comment number 5. So staff has determined that the shape and size of the park is not really compatible with the concept of snippet park. So we need a qualifying staff site amenity.
Mm-hmm. And I believe Lucy was going to address this side.
Okay, Lucy.
Hi, yeah, so I think that this is a little bit confusing. In the original staff notes on the comments, it was identified that we needed to have 317 square feet of site amenity space. So that's what we went with. That was the goal we were trying to reach. And I know staff says to comply with the site amenity requirements and that a snippet park, I agree that that is the most applicable of the typologies allowed, that the minimum snippet park is 600 square feet. I think what is unclear is that if we're only required to have a minimum of 317 square feet of amenity space based on the addition, but there are no minimum sizes that comply with that. I think that was a little, I guess it's unclear that we are supposed to provide additional and extra site amenity space because there's no typology that fits a project expansion of this size. So I think that what we did provide, I think I saw something about, too linear, too geometric, but I think that it does actually meet all of the parts of the snippet park. It meets the requirement of what our site amenity that we need to provide is, but it is, a little smaller than that 600 square feet. It is located adjacent to an operable building entry. I know staff had mentioned that maybe in my conversations with Marla, it would be a possibility to put it by the road, but in reviewing the site and the usage, it really made the most sense from our perspective to put that near an operable building entry where staff could use that as a respite. And this location made really a lot of sense in this existing, with all of the existing site conditions, which is why it's linear and geometric. But I didn't see anything in the snippet park description that talked about layout having to be non-linear or non-geometric. So I think that it does in fact meet it. Seating is the primary focus of that snippet park. And we've provided a shade tree, a birch planting throughout, brick pavers underneath the bench. So we really feel that it does meet all of the requirements. And I guess we would ask that even if it is slightly smaller than the size, that it is appropriate to the site and does in fact meet the other requirements.
Marla, do you have a response to that or thoughts?
Yeah, so each open space type each site amenity open space has a minimum square footage. And I understand what Lucy's saying is that, they are only required to provide 350 square feet or 300. But, if they're going to choose this type, they have to meet all the things that go with this type. So it would need to be a minimum of 600 square feet. Our perception of this is that it's, there's a lot of description of a snippet. It should be small sitting area, clearly intended to provide welcoming respite between or adjacent to buildings, may serve general public, employees, residents, or customers. Seating must be main focus of the space, must be present year-round, fixed seating is required. Landscaping shall be a primary component because the space is inherently small. It shall be carefully landscaped, but landscaping should not interfere with seating, but instead should complement it. Should appear warm and inviting rather than temporary. All of these things are the requirements for a snippet, and I don't mean to be a jerk, but I'm looking at it and it looks like a bench next to the door. I wonder if there's a way to, use some of that space that's between the building and the property line to maybe expand that way if you don't want it up by the street. There are other open space types. I tend to agree that this is probably the most likely to be used of the types for this kind of use. So I'd love to see you, make this work, but I don't think it can't meet unless it's 600 square feet.
So there's no waivability to that size requirement, even though we're technically only, I guess we're, and this is probably a question for, regarding the LDRs, but I guess I don't understand why. I understand we need to provide the typologies, but there's no typologies for small projects. And I think that those come up, and this is a perfect example of a business in South Burlington that is, trying to expand and meet all of these regulations. But in order to do that, we have to go above the minimum requirement that's actually, and I know it's only like a couple hundred square feet, but so I guess my question is this is not waivable to have a reduced size, even though, because we are meeting the requirements?
I'm going to let Marla speak to that, please.
Well, the board is familiar with their waiver authority in the case of site plans. The board has limited waiver authority in the case of site plans to waive some of the dimensional standards for site plan review. But, it just doesn't seem like a win to waive that when there's all kinds of space. There's space to the south. I don't know what that kind of box is next to the, between the bunker and the handicap space.
That was a snow storage area.
It's up to the board what you want to do here, but, we're looking for 600 square feet, and I work in a cubicle that's about 100 square feet. It's not really a ton of space. If that's the 317 square feet that Lucy's saying they have, picture double that, and what is really the.
We can work on expanding that area to 600 square feet. With the revised plans I forwarded this morning, we have a fair amount of snow storage on the northernmost portion of the parcel. So if we eat into that snow storage area in between the accessory structure and where the proposed snippet park is now, I think we would be able to get to 600 square feet.
Okay, good, thank you. Thank you. Number 6, this is a request that your plan needs to indicate where the underground utilities are and that there are underground utilities.
Yep, so we are showing electric lines on sheet 2, the grading and utility plan. Right now, they're just called out with an E. We're trying to revise that to UE for underground electric, as they will be underground electric.
Thank you.
Yep.
And there's a need to enclose the dumpsters.
We're okay with that as well.
Okay, thank you. Number 8. Back to parking again.
Mm-hmm.
What would constitute adequate and legal parking?
Yep. So, in talking to Matt, it sounds like there's 20 registered vehicles for Pinnacle Properties. 4 of those go home in the evening, so it would be, during the day, it could potentially be up to 20 spaces, but a lot of times they're out on site. Overnight, it would be 16 spaces. That plan I forwarded this morning had a total of 24 spaces in it, so that would be a little bit more, but it would also allow for a little bit future growth if they get another registered vehicle for the company.
Okay. Are we good with that, board? Okay. Comment number 9. We had hoped to have an update from the city arborist.
I don't think I heard from him. He's usually so good. Hang on. Let me just check my inbox in case I missed it. Well, I don't have anything. I know that Craig has reviewed some of Lucy's plans in the past, and she's been really good about adopting going forward, so I'm not terribly concerned about it. That's a bummer.
So what do we do about this?
So let me just get to that comment. 9. I mean, I think that, Dan just described that they're going to make some revisions to the plan. We do have an opportunity to get Craig's eyes on this before we close the hearing. But like I said, Lucy's been working with Craig on some stuff in the past, and I wouldn't expect major changes. I wouldn't worry about it too much, but I can make sure we get it for a continued
So
hearing.
does that preclude closing tonight?
Well, the other things that we just talked about already do.
All right.
Yeah, and we're happy to make changes if Craig has them and discuss anything he would see that needed to change.
Okay, thank you. So number 10, we need some clarity about the snow storage, please.
Mm-hmm. So I think before the plans that were submitted, there was outside storage, snow storage. It wasn't very clear, very well defined where that snow storage would be in relation to the outdoor storage of equipment. So these plans I forwarded this morning kind of refine that, put the snow storage in the northwest corner of the proposed parking lot behind the existing parking. So any outdoor storage wouldn't be blocking that snow storage area.
Okay, you good with that?
What? Yeah, you're the board.
Yep,
But just for my understanding,
Yeah.
what do you store there in the summer that doesn't need to be stored in the winter?
We don't really store, we have the storage facilities on the south side, and those are filled with material throughout the year. So technically we don't store anything on the facility, mulch and salt or topsoil, but they're covered in those sheds, and then those sheds are empty during the winter, and the snow we truck out, generally speaking.
But Dan mentioned that area to the north would be snow storage in the winter and outdoor storage in the summer.
I would assume outdoor storage could possibly be for stones that we're keeping for another job that would be there. It could necessarily be for a trailer from time to time or a loader, but generally speaking, most of the storage is inside for equipment, and then for materials, it's stored in those facilities that the board approved.
Okay, thanks.
Years
It helps
ago.
me understand, just how this
Yeah.
kind of a business operates. So when I have these conversations in the future.
Of course. We'll have trailers from time to time there. If we are doing huge stone patios of something, we'll get a pallet of stone and we'll store it there for until the job starts, and that could be a couple of days. But we generally are pretty neat and organized in the sense of storing. I don't like to see. It gives me anxiety to see a lot of stuff all over the place.
All right. We don't want that.
No.
Okay. Board, are we good with that?
Sounds fine.
Okay, let's move on to number 11. This is about screening and buffering. Question is, do we consider the proposed site to achieve a level of screening and buffering consistent with the previous approval, or whether they will require the applicant to provide a similar total caliper of trees or a similar total value of trees in today's costs? So we saw their plan and heard about their plan for screening.
Yeah, so does this all make sense? The previous approval had sort of a beyond standard required level of plantings. And so once an approval is an approval, then you have to maintain those plantings forever, or replace them. And so the question is about whether they've achieved what was previously achieved by the plantings with their revised plan. And so in the packet towards the end that's the previously approved plan that Paul has up now. And in this orientation, left is Harborview Road, left is north.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, board?
Can we bring up the what they're proposing now just for comparison? I know we looked at it earlier, but
Sorry, can you say that again?
sorry, I was just could we look at what they're proposing now? Just I know we looked at it earlier, but just for
Yeah, I think
quick
sheet
side by
9.
side.
Sheet 9 would probably be the best sheet to look at.
With the landscape plan?
Yes, it is.
And roughly speaking, how many of the existing trees will be removed due to how many removed versus how many added? Roughly. 'Cause you talked about a lot of dying trees there.
There are most of the trees that are on site now are pine trees. Those are past there. Yeah, I mean, I would have probably think like in my count, there's probably 15 full-grown pine trees.
That'll come down.
Yeah, that are either going to come down by Mother Nature or come down by a chainsaw.
But it's all of the trees that are there today are proposed to be removed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm counting roughly 30. Roughly.
Mm-hmm.
When I looked at the plan prior, when they built the building, it didn't look like there were a lot of trees installed there. It looked like there were a lot of shrubs when I was just glancing at it.
So do we think this level of screening is adequate?
I mean, to some extent, given the topography, and I think what makes it sort of like look nicer. I mean, nobody likes to see stormwater ponds, but at least it'll. You got to treat the stormwater. That's the number one goal, and then it should look pretty nice in the end once it's fully grown out. But
Unless I'm mistaken,
So-
the tree, yeah, thank you. That's what I wanted to see. They don't really block so much anymore.
and we want people to see the windows on the north side of the building so that they're effectively transitioned without abruptly as they move into the residential district.
Are we being funny?
No, I'm serious. We have to change this. So this old idea of hiding everything behind a wall
Yeah.
of green.
No, I agree. I agree. So what do we do with this board? Lucy, did you have something to say?
No, I was just going to give a little bit of a description of what's proposed in case anybody had questions, but I think it sounds like everyone maybe understands and I don't need to elaborate.
Well, so I do have if there are 30 trees there today, how many trees, what are you putting in?
Counts in there in the upper right corner there.
Yeah, so what's existing on site right now is mostly white pines, and then there's also some Norway maples, which we know are invasive and those should come out anyway. So this is kind of a good thing. There's also cornice that were planted, dogwoods that were planted in the original plan. So what we're proposing in this plan is a variety of, we're really taking kind of a multi-pronged approach here. We have our street trees, our deciduous street trees, kind of more your ornamental trees along the road frontage. And those include, maples, but not too many, because I know Craig doesn't like too many maples on any one project. So we've got some maples, we have some quercus oaks in the stormwater area, and then also some sweet gums. So we tried to focus on, native plantings, plantings with broad crowns and branching habits to provide that screening year round for our larger deciduous trees, and then also giving fall color. And then for the smaller story tree, we have those ironwoods, the carpinus, the American hornbeam, and those are your kind of middle canopy. They'll be shorter than the large deciduous trees, and we've kind of placed those around at different elevations to try and screen an interstitial level of the building and the site. And then we also have our large shrub plantings, again, focusing on native plants with different, ornamental and benefits, for pollinator species. So we've got our cornice, we have our button bushes. So all of these sort of stormwater plants that transition and will provide all of this, like a different level of screening. And then behind all of that, along the fence, we've provided a evergreen arborvitae hedge that will grow up and be, 15 to 20 feet when it's mature. And that will line the entirety of the building frontage and the wall, the fence. And it does turn the corner along the fence to the west. So it kind of borders the entry road. And then we've got a couple pines along the entry road as well to provide some more of that evergreen screening. But those are the plant materials that we used on here to try and create a similar density of screening using similar materials. It is a little bit different just because of the conditions. And I think Dan had noted that we are working around a stormwater basin. So there are certain areas where we just can't put these larger trees. So we are confined by some of those factors.
So is the question to the board, is the proposed new planting and landscaping equal to either the value or caliper total of what's being removed?
More or less. I mean, the question is it achieving the same objectives? So you could look at the value, you could look at the caliper, or you could look at the objectives, which is what staff is kind of suggesting you do here, because, this is a 70% lot coverage district, and it seems unfair to say, well, you can't build out to your 70% because you have this previously approved landscaping. Nope, lost whatever else I was going to say.
Okay.
That's the whole thing, apparently.
Right. So I guess the question for us, board, is do we believe that this is adequate screening and buffering?
I'd say it's pretty robust.
Yeah.
I'm going to go out on a limb and agree with that.
Okay, good.
Sorry.
All right.
Was that a pun?
Totally missed it. All right. So let's move on to let's branch out to the last. Number 12.
As long as you don't get stuck in the weeds on it.
Yeah, okay. We're going to leave that behind.
Oh my God.
Sorry. Number 12.
Just let it grow.
We need an update on the stormwater, please.
Yeah, so I sent it to, again, like the city arborist, I sent it to the stormwater department and did not hear back from them. Have you talked to Dave Wheeler?
I
lately?
haven't since I submitted my responses to his initial
Okay.
comments.
We got to get these people in line.
I know. I mean, they've been working really hard on other projects.
Of course.
And they are short-staffed.
Yes.
Yeah, Dave's position hasn't been.
Oh, right. Stormwater is. Got it.
Okay, so we pretty much know we're going to have to have you come back again. We're going to continue this.
Yeah, so let's circle back to staff comment 2 and 4, please. So staff comment 4 we skipped over, but it's also about the appearance of the building, and it gives a little bit more of what the criteria are. It's also part of 4.06, which is the sort of character of the area standards. And it talks about, you know, the pattern and rhythm of the development defined by the existing area, architectural features in the area, and then limit impacts and intrusions to privacy on adjoining properties. And the staff comment on number 4 was, you know, that it could be done a little, there could be a little bit of enhancement to make it better comply with these standards. So where is the board after the rest of the discussion, understanding how the landscaping is going to work?
Where is the board on?
My question, right? Do we feel a prevalent pattern exists? Yes or no?
Do we feel a what?
Number, they're right there in the middle of page, just above the red text in number 2, red letter 2. It says, maintain, establish a consistent oriented street, and where a prevalent pattern exists, the rest of the clause applies. So my question is, do we feel that there is a prevalent pattern in the area, I guess, or in that street?
Yeah, I drive that street regularly, and I don't think that what they propose is inconsistent with what's there. And the
Right. Well, and then my larger point is if there is a pattern, the pattern is randomness of the orientation of buildings, the uses, this relative setbacks. So that, to me, all that really matters is the clause before that, which is maintain or establish a consistent orientation to the street. So they're basically moving a little closer to the street. The orientation of the building remains the same. They're not creating an L or a T or an H. So to me, that standard is met as far as B.
Others?
I'll agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does anyone not agree? I think we're all in agreement.
Okay, and so going to staff comment number 4, do they need to improve the appearance of the building in any way? Are we assuming that what Matt suggested about adding a couple windows and corrugated metal or corrugated panels, is that part of your decision, or are you accepting what they proposed and Paul is shown on the screen tonight?
What think is the board?
Well, when I look at the text starting at the bottom of page 4, to accomplish 1 and 2, pattern and rhythm, I'd say it's consistent with the overall pattern of development in that street grid or block of the area, because there isn't really a distinct pattern. Respond to recurring or representative architectural features. There is not a prevailing architectural feature in there, but it would probably be consistent of industrial buildings. It's not a barn. And it definitely does not, with all the robust screening and the plantings, it does limit impacts and intrusions to privacy on adjoining properties. So to me, that standard is met. I don't see anything that's calling out the need for, the very beginning of the standard, number 1, does trying to encourage more variety, interesting visual interruptions to create attractive transitions. It's just hard because it feels like we're piling on to try to do something that's hard to achieve.
Something that's already been.
Well, I get the standard. It's just was basically just a series of light industrial buildings in this whole area.
Right.
So I mean, over time, LDRs have the ability where if you compare them, 50 years apart, you can see the improvements that were generally desired. So this is one of the first applicants, probably under the new regs, in this portion of South Burlington along this street. So just if we do want them to put in some windows there and otherwise provide some architectural interest like we do with all the car dealers, then we just need to be sure that when we're all dead and gone 5, 10, 20 years from now, whatever, that other applicants also have to make their additions nicer. That's all I'm going to say.
So do we want to require the applicant to do some interest, windows, different color, whatever we talked about earlier, or are we good with what they're presenting?
Well, the applicant proposed.
I did propose it, but I would now thinking if the arborvitaes are going to get 15 to 20 feet in 5 to 10 years, those windows and that siding will not be visible to anyone. So the windows will be opened up to a bunch of arborvitaes. So
Got it. Yep.
am I just including the windows and the siding?
Right. But these standards are separate from whether or not things are screened or not. It's just talking about the character of buildings in the neighborhood as a whole. So that, am I right?
I have a crazy thought. So I'm not a landscape architect. Lucy is. Maybe she has an answer to this. Are those arborvitaes likely to be successful? Actually, Matt, you probably know this in your business too. Are they likely to be successful there? And are we going to be having a conversation about a site plan amendment to no longer require those trees in 3 to 5 years? And then are we going to say, darn, I wish we had required some architectural interest? But if they're, if it's very likely that they'll be successful, I don't think that that's as big a concern.
They're very hardy, so they'll strive there.
Even though they're right up against the building and kind of in the shade.
Well, they'll be a little bit away from the building, but they will. I've seen them grow in other areas that they grow very tall in South Burlington, off of like Inverness or Ironwood by the golf course, where they use large hedgerows of those to block out Glen Eagles or Inverness, and they get large and they're shaded as well. So they do well as a shade, which form like a barrier.
Would you agree with that, Lucy?
Yes, I would say they do. I mean, they do best in sun, but they also grow in, part shade conditions. So I think that this is a appropriate application for them. And I mean, Marla, if it came to a point where maybe the ones that are north of the building, there are species, if we found that there was not success with those species, we could use a taxus, an upright yew, in place of them that accomplishes the same goals. It's just a different species, and we were trying to maintain a continuous hedge. So I think that this species is appropriate, and it will grow to be its mature height and width. And we did plant them at very close spacing. They're 4 feet on center. So the intent, like Matt said, is to create a hedgerow.
Okay, so having heard that, and I'm looking at the time, are we willing to let go of the windows? Board?
I liked Dan's kind of outline of what we're looking at here. So in this situation, I agree that the windows aren't necessary.
Okay. Does anyone disagree with that?
I'm just a little disappointed because applicant said you go, and then immediately in the same meeting pulled the recommendation, and just a little bit surprised. But I think it could add value
either
to your
way.
building.
If you feel like it's going to make people driving up Harborview Road look at the building and be like, "Ooh, I want to move here," I mean, to me, it's a few windows and some siding. I'm not like opposed to it if that's what you want. If you want.
And I think Matt's point too was that with the, evergreens in front of those windows too, if perhaps those windows did go in, maybe we don't put in that hedgerow in front of there too, so they would be visible. I think Matt's point was just they wouldn't be visible upon maturity, so.
Okay, so we're going to go with windows. Is that what I'm hearing?
It's his call, really. It's the applicant's call. I mean, for me, I think in part he was answering that question that way because he's sitting here watching this political process go on, and it's seeming like, oh yeah, you got to do this. But on closer reading of the bylaw, it's like, I mean, there is no recurring or representative architectural features that define neighborhood character other than what already exists in the area. I don't see a lot of other buildings in the area that are doing interesting things. They're all older, light industrial buildings. And then, yeah, its orientation is correct. And it's definitely doing privacy, so it's not required.
And the standard does, in number one, it speaks to architectural characteristics, landscaping, and buffer. So it does seem like that it can be taken into account here that that's going to be implemented on this site in absence of
good point. Yeah.
putting architectural characteristics. So for this particular standard, it does seem like the visibility is being taken into account.
So do we have what we need, board, to make a decision?
We have a drawing that's about to show us.
Oh, I didn't realize that I was live there. Sorry. I was just drawing what I was thinking I was seeing. I thought I was on a screen share. So this is essentially, I think, what you're looking at, right? That's about a 17-foot story, about 8 to 10 feet of arborvitae. Is that?
Was the mature height? Can you
They're
go over
about
that?
7 feet. We'll probably be getting them at 6 to 8 feet tall, so they'll go in at 6 feet.
And they get pretty
Be
tall.
fairly
They get
large.
to 15, 20 feet. Yeah.
Oh, they,
Yeah,
sorry,
I
or
thought
8 to
Lucy
10 is where
said
they
they
would
were
get
going to
to.
be.
Relatively quickly.
So they would get to 15-ish feet then? Oh, okay. So then you're talking about like.
I'm curious. A question for the applicant just that as a straightforward question. Why do you want the arborvitae?
Why do? Well, personally, if I was driving, I wouldn't want to see a building, and I think it makes a nice screen, for the neighborhood. Right. There are some decent homes up there. I mean, I think it would just. Plus, we are a landscaping company, so relatively speaking, I want to look at windows if I was going to a business, and I thought it would be nice to have a row of arborvitaes. You wouldn't see the fence. The fence is kind of like
the fence is a little tacky, for lack of a better word.
Prison. Not that I've ever been in prison, but
But you've read about it.
I just wanted to clarify that. So I think the arborvitaes would be nice in front of the fence.
And do they indirectly, with that density, 4 foot on center, almost act as a form of security in a way, just because it blocks anybody who might want to go look in your yard and see what's there?
Yeah. Hopefully no one wants to steal our catalytic converters, so that will stop them.
All right, I'm aware of the time, so I think I'd like to move toward closure.
We need to continue the hearing.
Yes.
To address the couple things, mostly the open space. And then we'll do a full review of the plan that they submitted today for you guys to look at. But nothing stood out to me. We just want to make sure we're thorough. I'll make sure I poke Craig and Dave Wheeler on their comments.
What's the date?
So we need stuff 2 weeks before the meeting. So I can get you on November 15th if you can get stuff to me by November 1st.
Yeah, I think really I can send you the rest of the plan sheets. I think we'd like to go off that PDF I forwarded you today with the one change being the snippet park being expanded upon to the 600 square feet.
And so the board will have some time to digest the conversation about windows. I think that we're probably specific enough that we can close with the board's feedback.
What do you mean close with the?
Well, sorry, you guys will digest have a conversation in deliberations, come back on the 15th and say, this is what we decided we want you to do, and write it into the decision. And what Matt has proposed was pretty specific. It's, 2 windows, 4 feet high and 6 feet wide, on the north side of the building, and that would replace arborvitae in that location. So if the board decides they want to go that direction, I think we have enough to do it without actually seeing a plan, is what I'm trying to say.
So we will be reviewing a draft decision on the 15th.
Uh,
I guess, do you want us to close the hearing now, or do you want us to
No, I want
extend
you
it
to
to
continue the
November
hearing.
15th?
We're going to
Okay.
continue, but we're going to take public comment.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Is there any public comment? No. None here? Okay.
Can I move?
Please move.
Move to continue the hearing for site plan application SP-22-028 for Harborview Road to November 15th.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the motion is carried. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you all
We'll
for
see
your
you back
feedback.
here next month.
Thank you.
I have lost my power here. Okay. I don't have a plug. It's okay. I'll see it up there. Okay, agenda item number 8. Continued site plan application SP 22032 of UVM Medical Center to construct a 1.5-story, 84,006 square feet medical office and outpatient facility with associated parking, equipment, and stormwater treatment on an existing undeveloped 13.5 acre lot at 119 Tilley Drive. And I have lost my power. I ran out of juice, which is surprising because I had it plugged in this afternoon, and my comments, which I write on with a eye pencil. But this is we have a limited number of issues. So who is here for the, first of all, are there any disclosures or conflicts? Nope. Who is here for the applicant?
Myself, Gail Henderson King of White and Burke, and we have Ashley Bond from the UVM Medical Center. We also have Derek Reed from Krebs and Lansing, Dan Schneider from E4H, and then online we have Corey Mack from Wall Consulting Group. I believe James Finley, I never can remember how to pronounce his last name, from Wagner Hodgson, and I think Dave Kilty is on from Iceland.
Yes.
12 a.m. his time. So.
Wow, that's impressive. Okay. Since there's so many of you, I'm not going to ask if you've been sworn in already. Some of you I know have, but I see some new faces. So why doesn't everybody raise their right hand? Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Thank you.
I do.
Okay. The night is getting on. We've had you here many times, so I think it makes sense to move on to the staff comments. We're reviewing tonight a draft decision of findings of facts and conclusion and decision, conclusions and decision. Is that what the last piece is?
Findings of fact and decision, yes.
Okay, good.
Sorry.
Could
So-
I just request that, could we just have 2 minutes to kind of go over what we've done since the last meeting? Because when we left, there were some specific things that
Okay.
we needed to address.
Make it as brief as possible, please.
I will. First, there was an issue regarding the proposed recreation path surfacing of the porous pavement, and we were instructed to go and work with the Department of Public Works, which Derek Reed, our hero, did provide lots of information and work back and forth with them. And as of yesterday, they are in agreement to allow the pervious pavement. I believe Marla has received information from Dave Wheeler and
Okay.
I think that's one of the comments. We'll talk about it when we get to it.
okay.
Yeah.
And then we also have provided a 3-foot gravel path connection from the rec path near the proposed pocket park to the parking lot as requested. So we have done that. We also did adjust the shade trees around the parking lot onto the western side of the parking lot. Again, we are being respectful of the requests of our neighbors, so they're not a continuous line along there, but we did adjust them, so that is noted on the plan. We did review the neighbors Armstrong concerns about the existing utilities coming onto the property and making sure landscaping was not an issue. We've checked that and we're good with that. Let's see, I think, oh, in the water comments, the water department comments as of this afternoon, again, we've got confirmation from the water department that issues have all been addressed. And we're
When you say the water department,
Jay Nadeau of Champlain Water District, who represents the city, is my understanding.
Okay.
But there was some comments that were
that's
provided.
not stormwater division.
No.
No, okay.
No, there was comments that had been provided that were in the staff report. Last time, we thought they had all been taken care of. They showed up again in the decision. So again, we reached out,
Okay.
and Derek got those taken care of today.
Good. Thank you. So let's start going through the comments.
Sure.
Yeah, the windows, looks like they're proposed to be opaque, but it looks like, can you just clarify this for us, please?
There will be no spandrel windows. They will all be clear, what are they called? Clear vision panels. And we have provided color rendered elevations of what those look like, and Dan Schneider from E4H can address anything further on that, but there's no opaque windows.
Okay.
For this building.
Thank you for that clarity. We're into puns tonight. Okay, let's move on to the next comment. Number 2.
We were showing off the windows.
Yes, there's the elevations. And of course, it's hard to tell because the windows are blue, but they are clear glass panels.
Sure,
Clear
thanks.
vision panels, excuse me, is what they're called.
Next comments on page 4.
The bottom of page 4.
Okay.
So this is the comment about the surface of the recreation path connecting the O'Brien Eastview project to Tilley Drive. And I just get really excited about this, so I'm going to say it again. This is the path that connects from Heinsberg Road at what used to be known as Eldridge Street, through the O'Brien Hillside Development, through O'Brien Eastview, through this project, across to Community Drive, and all the way to Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a big deal. I actually saw when I ran an errand during lunch, and I saw a couple people on their bikes with like bike packing gear on that rec path
Nice.
near the Williston line. So this is really exciting. The applicant has requested to make this path pervious pavement because otherwise they don't think they can get state stormwater permit for it. Derek, as Gail mentioned, has worked really hard on convincing city staff that this is going to be okay. There is this reservation about allowing a permeable pavement path because it is a technology that we have not seen very much success with yet in Vermont. And we don't think it's, oh, poor us, we have the worst weather in the world. We think that there's just not a lot of experience with installers, with the manufacturers, with the people who do the maintenance. So the city stormwater section and DPW said that they are okay with it being pervious, but they'd like there to be some legal documents associated with that. And so what we would propose is that it can be pervious pavement, there would be an easement authorizing public use, and we'll find a better way to phrase this, but plowing and lawn maintenance. If we wanted to mow along the edge of it, just if you guys, for whatever reason, stopped mowing your lawn, because we can't obligate you to mow your lawn, until such time as the city accepts the path, ownership of the path, the applicant would be responsible for repair and maintenance necessary to maintain its status as a permeable surface.
And the medical center is fine with that.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next comment, and I believe the next one is a request. I have to wait till it's called up. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that was more that I just need your help in deliberation with how you wanted to draft this. And you're certainly welcome to talk about it tonight, but this was more not for the applicant, more just for you guys.
Okay, shall we hold this off till deliberation? Give us a chance to think about it? Okay, thank you. And is there one more staff comment, Paul?
Number 3.
There's a comment on the next page that says the board agreed to discuss this in deliberation.
Okay. And is there a 3? Did I hear you say yes, Dan?
Isn't there a 3?
Mm-hmm. Page 15.
Page 15.
Okay. I don't have my notes, so I'm just reviewing it. So it sounds like Gail spoke to this already. Correct?
I did. And if you wanted to pull up the landscape, the illustrative plan, which is the first plan in the packet that will show the proposed adjustment of the shade trees.
Gail, just to clarify, do you mean in what the supplemental that you provided or in the packet itself?
In the packet itself.
Okay, and you're
In-
looking for
in
the
the staff
illustrative?
report, whatever you call it, the decision, draft decision, staff report information.
This one?
Yes.
Okay.
So this comment was originally about the distribution of the shade trees. There's a minimum of 1 shade tree per 5 parking spaces, but they had them all on the north side, and the board had directed them to distribute them a little more evenly.
Okay. And you've done that?
Yes. We kept the windows of view sheds from the 2 abutting neighbors who had requested that, and we'd worked hard to maintain that. So
I
we wanted
bet.
to keep that.
Yes. Thank you for that. Dan?
That's not what the standard says. The standard's evenly throughout the parking lot to provide shade and reduce glare. That's what the standard says. And I know you're all afraid of a lawsuit that will shut this down, and if people want to do that, they can do that, because that's unfortunately the way this state operates. But if we allow this, then anybody can just say, I don't like this, I want those trees removed. And there's no standard in there for, if they wanted the view protection zone, these neighbors should have got it 50 years ago, like all the people on Dorset and Spear Street did, for better or worse. So I think this is a bad precedent to set. If people don't buy a house next to an empty lot. That's the number 1 rule of house buying. Or on the edge of a different zoning district either. So I know they're trying to be responsive to the neighbors, but the standard doesn't allow for, the board may vary on the interest of views or sunrise or sunset or whatever. Didn't say that. And we are religious in requiring every other applicant to do what this reg says.
So removing the neighbors who would complain with what they have achieved here, or do they meet the reg now? Or is it not meeting the reg? Regardless of.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, so regardless of the reason why they adjusted trees, the way the adjustments have been made, I only see part of the picture here. What should it be based on the reg, and or does this meet that requirement? I'm not able to judge that.
Okay. Maybe Marla can help us out with that.
So the rule, if you want to pull it back up, just kind of shift your split screen, is that it's 1 major deciduous shade tree within or near the perimeter of the parking area for every 5 parking spaces, evenly throughout the parking lot, a minimum of 30 feet apart. Generally, it doesn't make sense when the parking's right up against a building, so the board generally doesn't require trees between the parking and the building if there's not a lot of space there otherwise. But otherwise, as Dan said, the board does look for both the numeric and the spacing criteria to be met. This is pretty dense planting of trees compared to what we usually see. I don't know how it ended up being so many, maybe because there's a bunch against the building that don't get them. So it just seems like a lot in the areas where you have them. Usually we see them more spread out, but evenly spread out.
What's the blue? Is that handicapped?
No, that's the patient parking.
The patient parking, so, right, so the patients there on the west side, after they're done with their appointment, can get into their cars that are baking hot for the purposes of keeping a nice view.
This is James, the landscape architect. We have the correct number of trees. We could absolutely move some trees up in that where you're looking up in that sort of lawn box there, closer to the parking, to have additional shade down there, if that helped. So yeah, just page down from there, the trees and the ones to the left also, we can move them up closer to the parking lot or to the parking spaces. The patient parking to get more shade on that particular little area of parking, if that helped.
James, are you speaking about this area?
No, I'm talking about the one page up and to the left.
Here.
No, sorry, just to the right of that. Sorry.
Here.
Yeah, that one. So those trees that are just page down from there, we could move those up and get some better shade on those ones to evenly distribute it better. But we do have the correct number of trees.
What about
those two?
Those are just the two that are supposed to be.
That's the area I'm talking about, because those, there's an obvious clear gap. There is not even spacing, and there's no shade or reduced glare for those parking spots. I mean, it does say minimum of 30 feet apart, so you might be able to spread the trees out, but the idea is that they're spaced evenly, not arbitrary and capriciously.
Yeah, and I would just echo that, because I know we gave this direction at the last meeting that based on this criteria, my understanding was that maybe they were a little bit more spaced out in this area, like you would use that kind of 30 feet, but we would see something that looked more even and wasn't a clear gap that we're still seeing now. So I'll just say that was kind of the expectation. I was thinking that would be established here as well, that you all would kind of work with where trees could be placed without creating this gap, but still maybe not trying to be responsive to the concerns of the neighbors. So I just echo Dan that this isn't meeting the criteria right now.
Well, we can go ahead and adjust, as James mentioned, to make it more evenly, larger spaces, and still try to be responsive to our neighbors. I understand Dan's comment about the concern about the lawsuit, but the lawsuit is a big deal for the medical center. It will stop this project, and that's not what they want to do. So they've really been working very hard to try to work with everybody to come up with a solution. So yes, we can go ahead and adjust the trees more and get them more to meet the standard.
It's tough for us because we know you've gone the extra mile to try to be responsive, and we like to encourage that. By the same token, we feel very bound by our responsibility to adjudicate the LDRs consistently.
Right.
And this is hard for us to do because sometimes we understand things make sense, but if we break them for one project, we then set a precedent. So it's tough. Were you going to say something?
I understand.
Yeah, so I don't know if we're going to have any other things that need to be addressed. I would love to, it's 9:00, and I think that may be it for comments.
Well,
I thought there was one about the stormwater buffer.
Okay, I guess my big picture point, and is that I'd love to find a way to close. And if that means like James gets really specific about what he's going to do, I'd like
Okay.
to try to make time to do that.
Sounds like John had a question.
Yeah, I just, I mean, the applicants stated that by meeting the regs, there will be a lawsuit and that lawsuit will stop the project. It may postpone it, but I don't know that we can assume that the lawsuit will fall one way or the other. So maybe you'll still win.
Again,
slows things down.
we'll go ahead and make the adjustments so that we match the regulations as best we can.
Yeah, we will absolutely do that.
I can see where this would help with access overall to healthcare in this part of the state, right? This is important to do, important growth.
This is a pretty important project, yes. This is a replacement of the Fanny Allen Hospital that's not up to speed right now because of issues there.
So is it possible, I'm sorry, your name, architect, landscape architect is?
James Findlay.
James? Okay, James,
Yeah.
is it possible for you to show us what you could envision doing?
Yeah, we think you have the ability to draw on it if you want, James.
Well, I would, I mean, my first move would be to, along that southern edge of parking there, we were just talking about, we can move trees up there so that edge is fully covered.
Hey, James, can I interrupt?
Yes.
I think that we've given you the tool to annotate from your end so that you can actually draw what you're describing.
Okay. Where do I choose my tool? I don't, it's my first time doing this.
I think if you have it full screen, it's up at the top of the screen underneath the bar, maybe under view options, it says annotate.
You may have to bring your cursor all the way to the top and it'll appear.
Got it. Okay, I think I found it.
How many parking spaces is that where those trees would?
So I think in this area right along here, I could bring all of the trees up closer to the sidewalk. So these guys would all come up in here.
So what happens when you're annotating is we don't see it until you let go of the mouse, which is real weird, but just to let you know.
Okay, can you see what I've drawn in
Yes.
ink? Okay, so what I would do is I'd bring those trees that are further to the south and push them up so we have even spacing all along that edge. And then, I mean, Gail, I think you have to help me here. We can, obviously, we have the right amount of trees. We can space them evenly along this edge. I can pull these ones up close. I think, we just would have to, really reduce Brian's view shed, I guess, or his view opening. And I guess basically just, this is a difficult topic for the neighbors. So perhaps we go back out and meet with him and get to a place where we're framing his views in different direction and get another couple of trees. We can pull them down here. And perhaps, we pull another through and, do this area and just kind of give him, oh, sorry, I wish I could undo that one, can I? Yes, I can.
Where is his house exactly?
This is his house right here.
Okay.
So if I can, leave him a view corridor like that, I can fill up with trees like that. Is that acceptable? So the entire southern edge would be
So
covered.
what you're doing is in an attempt.
I'm just narrowing, yes,
the view.
Framing it, and perhaps we'll choose trees that actually do sort of get up big enough so we really do frame that view.
Okay. What do you think, board?
I mean, I just thought that we have hundreds of trees on this site. I mean, this is a very amply landscaped site. The college has gone, or the UVM has gone really to the max with this landscape.
I mean, I guess I would look to staff a little bit, and has there been a general standard of trying to be sure every space has some shade, or is there?
No, so it's really 1 per 5 parking spaces. If Paul, you're probably gonna just don't look. I'm gonna pull up a different project and show you something that's a little more typical of what we see for parking lot landscaping.
I'm gonna stop this share.
Yeah, that's fine. This is a form-based code project, so it never came in front of you. It was approved administratively. landscape planting plan. I think this is a Wagner-Hodgson plan. No, maybe not. Anyway, here goes. Sharing. Share screen. So this is meeting the number of shade trees and the even distribution in staff's opinion, because this is approved administratively. So it's fewer trees, but they are more evenly spaced.
But there clearly are some parking spaces that have no shade.
Yes.
In a direct 90-degree orientation, yeah. And I guess here's a weird question. Do you need every single last one of those parking spaces?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Right.
I don't think it's a weird question, actually.
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah, no, I guess it'll be the first
No,
thing.
I
You know,
mean,
we were all supposed to be on
yeah.
electric bikes in 5 years anyway, too. So, and the cars
I
will be,
would say, like,
you know, in 20 years, all the cars will be banned anyway, and we'll have no car dealerships anyway. So,
Well,
exactly.
looking at the spacing of what you're seeing on this plan versus if you can go then back to what we're proposing and what James added onto the plans, I think we're pretty close to.
Yeah, I just want, I think the biggest question is just confirming that 30-foot distance. I mean, that's the kind of threshold the regs do lay out as far as a maximum to say it's probably not even if you're putting gaps that are bigger than 30 feet. At least that's how I'm kind
what's a
of reading
minimum?
that.
Minimum of
Saying
30.
Or minimum. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's saying a minimum of 30
Oh,
feet.
sorry.
Because what
Yeah, it's
plan
a
that's up
minimum.
there on the screen right now, those trees
Yeah.
are
Okay.
way more than 30 feet
Yeah.
spaced.
Right, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so keep in mind, you know, the difference here, and I'm going to try to zoom in here on the left, except it loads really slowly because it's a color plan. You know, this is a totally different scale. The project that we're looking at with this applicant, those parking spaces, there's 20 maybe long, and this is maybe 10 long. You know, there's 3 rows in between each big landscape island. There's no real big landscape islands at all. So it's a different scale of project, but you kind of get a feel for, that's just the first example that came to mind.
I mean,
If you look
in
at our-
some respects, if you wanted to
spacing.
show you were treating all the neighbors equally, you would spread out. You're only acknowledging the one who's threatened the lawsuit. So ideally, the ones on the west would be more evenly spaced so that every neighbor would have a little bit of a gap depending on how much the foliage was expanding.
Well, the neighbor.
We've worked out with each of the neighbors exactly what they want. So some of the neighbors want full screening and some want views. So we've catered to all of them. And I would just say this plan actually to the right is a wonderful example. If you look, we have, you know, trees covering these parking spaces on 4 sides. If you look at the plan to the left and on many parking lots, there is absolutely no shade, you know, during the east and west. You know, as the sun moves through the sky, there's no shade at the east and at the west. We have shade on all 4 sides, you know, each of these sort of parking lots, on the inner parking lot and on the outer as well. So I think we're doing a very good job of shading.
Can I ask a question? The picture on the right and the picture on the left, was the picture on the right under a different set of regulations or our current?
It's the current regulations.
I mean, I have to admit, after seeing the picture on the right, I feel like the picture on the left is fine.
Yep. Me too.
Well, in terms of number of trees, I think that's
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
Spacing,
But
yeah,
the
looks-
spacing, you know, there is.
I don't think any straight-faced interpretation would view that as evenly placed.
No, and I would say it was, you know, the idea was to create sort of naturalistic drifts of trees. You know, we're trying to sort of give this this site sort of a more natural, you know, look to it as we're pulling rec paths and have pocket parks. We want this to be beautiful. And while I do love, you know, obviously maintaining the same practicality of throwing that same shade, but, you know, I think this is doing much more than just sort of parking lot island tree placement.
so. If you take according to your plan here, what is the width of the view corridor? And if you moved the trees as you suggested previously up, how much would that narrow the view corridor?
I mean, it's hard to say. It's, view corridors are kind of a fudgy thing in a way. I would say that we could pull it down and reduce that view corridor to maybe, 10 parking, 100 feet or something like that. 20, what we got there? 1, 2, 12 parking spots times 9, something like that, 108 feet.
I mean, the word evenly is not defined beyond the word even, and so you have this nice spacing throughout. It's kind of evenly distributed throughout the entire structure, even if it's not some sort of Soviet utilitarian 5 feet, 5 feet, whatever.
Well,
So,
can I make a
mean,
suggestion what evenly
blending
might
works for
mean?
me. I'm sorry?
I have a suggestion for what evenly might mean. If there's one shade tree required for every 5 parking spaces, could evenly mean approximately 1 per 5 parking spaces?
It could, or it could mean what we see here.
Yeah. So I just counted the parking spaces between the last tree and the end of this blue area, and I came up with 15. So, if we were to say, okay, 1 per 5 and evenly, then we would be looking at 3 trees kind of evenly distributed through that area.
Oh, okay.
Well, right, but that's the basic
That
standard.
doesn't.
I was just going to make one other observation about these, that when we were looking at the 2 plans side by side, and acknowledging that it's the applicant's responsibility having chosen to put parking around the perimeter, but part of what looks so different between those 2 that you had side by side was that the black and white one had chosen to have circulation around the whole outside, therefore circulation, no tree requirement. So they had many fewer trees. Here, they've chosen to put parking on the outside. They have, therefore, a requirement to, but it also then has an appearance of being much more overall, sort of per total square foot of parking, to be much more landscaped.
Interesting.
Understanding it's their responsibility, but that might give some context as to this one does certainly have a feel of being overall more landscaped.
But I agree with Dan that those patient parking spaces, that strip, those cars are going to be mighty hot when people come out exhausted and hurting and whatever. I mean, so I think having some screening around there, if there's
if there were not that the 5 1 tree every 5 spaces is a rule, but it helps to interpret this and spread it out. I mean, you sprinkle 3 trees there somewhere along the gap and come out there with a tape measure and a theodolite for the neighbor and sight on Mount Mansfield or whatever he wants to look at. And, I think,
I think that's what we're going to have to do. I mean,
Yeah, we'll work with the neighbor and we'll adjust the trees along that western side of the parking lot to be able to accommodate what the neighbor's looking for, but meet what you need for regulations.
So I can't close on that. The board can't close on that, but I do have room in 2 weeks. And we could continue them for 2 weeks.
That was gonna be my question, and I just wonder if it seems like we got to like a number of and I don't know if the applicant commit to this without kind of looking at it more closely of putting 3 trees in that area. Does that feel comfortable enough? But I understand that.
Yeah, so in order to write a condition, the condition has to be specific. So if the condition is,
I'd feel safer. I think they'd feel safer being consulting with the neighbor and saying Albrecht was being a hard ass. He's going to do this, and he's going to want to micromanage every tree.
right.
And I think we'd want to feel comfortable that we're being listened to, and all. So I think it, come back on the 15th. It shouldn't take that long. It would be the primary item, so.
And we have a job to do, and I don't think we want to feel like we're being held hostage by one neighbor, because it sets a dangerous precedent for us to respond to every.
Right.
I mean, I think that earlier suggestion of us, we will place 3 trees along in that space, I think to close this application seems very reasonable to me. We'll work it out with the neighbor.
Right. I think that would work. And then again, what James had shown for the adjustments I think we can
Yeah.
easily do those.
Absolutely.
And then,
I mean, we've added rec paths, pocket parks. We will absolutely put these 3 trees in that area and close this application, if we can close this application.
So,
Is that
so you're
specific?
suggesting we close? Can we, or should we
Well,
continue?
if that's,
I don't feel I'll personally vote against closing because I want to see exactly where these trees are because
Okay.
I know you're trying to be accommodating and moving along, but you know,
Well, it's 2 weeks.
yeah.
yeah,
And then for what it's worth, I do like that idea of the trees that were on the north side of the building. I do like moving them closer to those parking spaces and all that as you proposed when you're first drawing there, James.
I'll do that as well.
Yeah, so
'Cause
typically we require plans.
it's meeting the intent. We're trying to, the all southern side of the, there, so.
So typically we require materials to be reviewed 2 weeks prior to the continued hearing. We don't need to do any work on those plans. We don't need to look at them. The board needs to look at them. So if you could get them to us 1 week before the hearing, I can just kind of send them to the board when I send the rest of the stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, that's fine.
we
Yeah.
can easily turn this around fairly quickly.
Okay.
Once we
Yeah,
can reach
no
out to the
problem.
neighbors and make sure
Okay.
we get their comments.
So before we take a vote to continue, let me see if there are any members of the public who want to provide comments. Do you see any online?
I do not. I do not see any online.
Okay, and nobody's here. Okay, I'm going to move that we continue site plan application SP 22032 to our next meeting, which is
November 1st.
November 1st, the day after Halloween. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion's carried. We will see you back here on November 1st.
Okay,
Thank you for your willingness to work with us.
thank you. We appreciate it. And just to clarify, this is the last remaining issue we have, correct?
I'm sorry?
This is the last remaining issue that we need to deal with, correct?
Yep, the board has a couple things to decide in deliberation, but
Right.
So was there anything related to the stormwater buffer, not the stormwater, the wetland buffer that we needed to talk about? No, okay. Thinking of something
All right,
else.
super.
Okay,
Thank you.
great.
We
Thank
will,
you so much.
We'll be back on November 1st.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave, for signing in from Iceland.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay. Oh, gosh. I did not review the minutes, but did anyone else review the minutes? We can get that, that's the next
Other
agenda
business
item.
comes
Okay,
after
all right,
minutes.
let's pass the minutes, all right.
I thought the minutes looked fine.
Okay.
I'll
Do you
make
wanna
a
move
motion
it?
to approve the minutes of September 7th as drafted.
I will second.
Any discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Is there any other business?
Yes, what's the latest on, well, two-part question. What's the latest on Wheeler Dog Park and what's the latest on Farrell Dog Park, which I walked by this morning again and hung my head in shame.
Wheeler Dog Park, briefly, what was physically installed was smaller than what the board had approved. There was a discussion with the council. The council asked for some specific minor changes in terms of the gates and entry and materials so that it was more accessible. Public Works said that they could do that immediately, and that is not at the level of what was reviewed by the board. The party, and then the council said, once those are done, open up the park. There was then discussion of bringing back some of the areas that had been approved as maybe more wild areas within the park. What Public Works had expressed concern was that there's some undulations and it's difficult to maintain. The council was saying as long as we set expectations for everybody about what those areas are, so they're going to come back with a specific plan to council on that, and we will assess whether that needs to come before the board or not. Likely, if it's not changing wetland impacts, it would be administrative, right? If anything.
Yeah, the only reason it came in front of the board is because the entrance area was in a wetland. But a fence in and of itself, outside of a wetland, doesn't require board review.
So will some of the wetlands be within the fence?
Yes, and that's not changed from your previous approval.
Oh, okay. So we're talking muddy dogs.
Well, or less, right? It would be
Okay.
either the same as you approved or less.
Okay. Does that
I
do
don't
it?
have an update on Farrell.
What's wrong with Farrell?
Well, no, it's just, there's been work proposed in Farrell for the last several years. It's still not done, and I can't remember where it is right now, so. But I can talk with that about offline with Paul, or whoever he tells me to talk to.
Okay. I think we're done. Any other new business?
Thank you,
you,
Madam
Paul,
Chair.
for being
Awesome.
with us tonight
My pleasure.
and
Staff.
driving.
Thank you.
Great job
Thanks,
as
Marla,
always.
as always.
All right, we will see you on the 1st.
Okay.
Thank you.